Hello there and welcome. I'm Untitled Chapter. In this video, I'm going to talk about the important factors that make a person improve sales. So before moving on to the factors that improve sales, let's look after the key blocks that make a person fail in sales. So there is a rope chain to sales, and in that rope there are 8 important blocks. And the first and foremost block is not being able to gather enough information about your client. It may be your client's name, or about his company, or about the origin of his company, anything. So any kind of information that is completely irrelevant to your product or service, but it should be relevant to your client's perspective. So you should be talking more about your client. The second important block is whenever there is a meeting between you and your client, never be late. So if you're late, it creates a bad impression about you to your client. And the third important block is your client not liking you. So if your client doesn't like you, the probability of him buying your product or service is reduced to 50%. The fourth important block is not being able to identify your client's need. So if you're not being able to identify your client's need, you'll probably not be able to sell your product or service to them. And the fifth important block is not adding enough benefits to your client's needs. And the sixth important block is whenever there is objection for your client when you're adding your benefit, and when you're not being able to satisfy that particular objection, then that is even a block. And the seventh is not being able to follow up your client, and the eighth is not being able to close the deal. So these are the 8 important blocks that make a salesperson fail in sales. So if every salesperson were able to jump over all of these blocks and finish the line, they are most probably to win the sale. So now let's move on to the strategies of sales. There are 2 important strategies to improve sales. The first one is the old strategy, and second is the new strategy. The old strategy consists of 4 important steps. The first one is contacting the buyer, displaying your product, presenting about the product description, and finally making them buy a product. So contacting the buyer in the sense, it may be a cold call or simply knocking the door and displaying a product, presenting it, and making the other person buy a product. It is simply forcing the client to buy a product irrespective of their needs. The conversion rate of this particular strategy is only 10%. So if you contact 100 clients, only 10% will be willing to buy a product. The new strategy is completely different. It consists of 4 important steps. The first step is not contacting the buyer or not knowing about their needs. The first and foremost step is building a relationship between your client. So after building a relationship, the next step is to identify your client's need. And the next is prescribing a solution for their need. And the final step is closing the deal. So before closing the deal, there might be some objections from your client side on your benefits added. So you have to solve that particular objections too. So these are the new strategies to improve sales. So now let's go deep into the new strategy. The first step is building a relationship. Building a relationship in the sense, when you build a relationship, it builds trust between you and a client. And there's a chart that describes how a person is more likely to buy a product when you build a relationship. It builds trust. This particular chart consists of 4 columns. The first one is if your client wants to buy a product and if he likes you, that particular product is sold. If he wants to buy a product and if he doesn't like you, he is probably not going to buy a product. And the second thing is if he is more likely in the favor to buy a product and if he likes you, he is very much likely to buy a product. If he doesn't like you, he is unlikely to buy a product. And the third is if he is mostly against not buying a product, he is most probably to buy a product, and if he doesn't like you, he is not going to buy. And if he doesn't want to buy a product and if he likes you, he is possibly going to buy a product. And if he doesn't like you, he is never going to buy a product. That's it. So there are various subcategories in building relationship with your client. The first thing is your body language. So whenever there is a meeting between you and a client, you should be smart and clean. You should have a perfect grooming. And second thing is, when you enter your room, you should have a smile on your face. And when the meeting gets over, you should have a firm handshake. You shouldn't be a loose handshake, you should have a firm handshake. And the fourth one is knowing your client's name. So in the next video, we'll be looking after the ways to build a relationship and the other categories like making them feel important and what are the ways to build a questioning funnel. So all these categories will be discussed in